what that had really taught me, it's not always about technology. It's about deep conviction, and it's about figuring out what are the real hard problems that we need to solve at the customer level. And it's not even always about technology. So the timing, what I learned the hard way is that ideas are great, timing has to be perfect, and then the market fit has to be there at the right time. So that was a great learning experience, which helped me as a stepping stone to go build my subsequent startups.
Sastry, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you're at, right? Like everyone knows, oh wow, he's this amazing guy with this amazing story. Current CTO, a high growth company, he's been everywhere from Johnson Controls and StubHub. So they are aware of that, and they're going, yeah, but how'd you get there, right? Right? What was the steps? Because I want to be in your shoes in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. What were the things that you feel like, if you think of pivotal moments in your career that brought you to where you're at?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, thanks for having me here. Happy to be here with you
Yeah.
guys. And so I, just to give you a little bit of a context on where I came from, I started off as a hardcore engineer, right? So working on operating systems, core technology, moved on to the higher levels of middleware applications and so on, which led me into startups. But really, if I can think about a couple of pivotal moments in my career early on that kind of shaped my ability to get into these leadership roles. I can think about a couple of examples. One, early on in my career, this was early 90s, late 80s, where I used to work for a French company called Bull SA. If those of you that remember, in those days, the Unix operating system, which is the more popular upcoming one, Sun Microsystems, which used to have complete control on that operating system code. All of the other technology companies like IBM, HP, Apollo, all of these companies would not get access to that. So what they had done is they built a consortium called Open Software Foundation that they've actually joined to build a parallel operating system. And this French company that I referred to that I worked for also was part of that consortium. So kind of long story short, so I was deep into the development, building a lot of complex modules like process management, memory management, and all of that. But really what struck me was, while we're actually building code, very challenging problems and everything else, that, I was more interested in what's the purpose behind it. So I actually started talking to other colleagues and departments within the company. What's the actual problem we're trying to solve? Yes, we're trying to go build a brand new, great operating system, but ultimately, how does it actually seek the value? So I realized I had this instinct to kind of zoom out a little bit and to understand the bigger picture. And this is when, for example, I got in touch with one of the use cases for the company. Back then, it was called System Save and Warm Restart. Think about it: late 80s, early 90s, the computer systems were not anywhere close to where they are today, right? They used to have this thing called a battery backup unit, which whenever there is a power outage, this battery backup unit can probably last a couple of minutes. Now, people wanted to see, how do we actually, when the power comes back up, exactly things continue to pick up from where they left off, right? So I was actually then solving that problem. So long story short, that was one of the people who said, look, yes, technology is great, but I'm actually into seeing the bigger picture, which I probably gave me some clues that, hey, might be, wide into some of these leadership roles down the road. That's one thing I can think about. The second thing, example that I can think about, and these two are distinct examples that actually paved path for how I got to where I got to here, right? I used to work at Oracle in late 90s and early 2000, and this was the pre-cloud. Even before the term cloud computing was actually invented, we used to call it grid computing. And then I actually got into the bigger picture, emphasizing this, and actually, founded a startup. I called it Open Grid Solutions at that time. This is very similar to what we're used to today in the cloud, where how do you do infrastructure as a service? This term wasn't even coined back then, right? We were calling something else at the time, but the concept is the same. How do you do elastic computing? How do you do application level hosting and SLAs, where each and every customer or doesn't have to worry about how to set up this infrastructure. So I did early on an early version of this product, and I call this a grid at that time, right? So, and I learned a lot in that process. Of course, AWS subsequently, became popular and released their web services and so on. But what that had really taught me, it's not always about technology. It's about deep conviction, and it's about figuring out what are the real hard problems that we need to solve at the customer level. And it's not even always about technology. It's about the people along the way. Empathy for people. Great companies are built around people. Of course, ideas are a dime a dozen, lots of ideas. And that actually led me to continue on to co-found multiple startups, as well as with even a successful exit with one of those startups as well. So these examples, I think, kind of gave me some early indication, instinct that might be wide for this, and it ultimately got me to where I am today.
So tell me a little bit more about that. So when you talk about early on, you were designing a system that was pre-cloud. It was the cloud stuff before the cloud stuff existed. There's always market timing. And I think we talked a little bit about that behind the scenes previously, which was like, how did that startup go? What did that look like? What was the success of that? Help me break down that one a little bit, because I think that could be a really interesting story as well.
Yeah, so definitely. So this is a great learning for me there as well, right? So this is back in 2004, 2005, right? When I came up with this idea concept, founded it, and built an initial version to say, look, part of the challenges that each company has is to build this infrastructure. They spend a lot of time, investment, people, money in that. But rather, it'll be more beneficial for them to start focusing on their business problem and then leave alone this setting it up. So that's the premise for what I founded. And I actually built some initial version of it, showcases to a few potential prospects. Everybody loved it. I talked to even companies like eBay and a number of other, big names as well. Everybody loved it, but they almost all came back with a skepticism that, hey, Sastry, this is a wonderful idea. It's going to save us a lot of time. It's going to be more efficient for us. But I'm not sure if we're ready to host our data outside of our four walls, right? How is it actually going to work? Now, can we actually come and do this inside our company, right? And so that was the attitude back then in 2004, 2005. And ultimately, the timing was not right. Timing was not a market fit was there. Everybody's excited. Ultimately, we knew that was the right thing to do. But as luck would have it, exactly 18 months after I, wrapped that up and actually was doing something else and joined eBay to build their eBay, 2.0 version using service-oriented architecture and so on. 18 months later, right, AWS announced their AWS Web Services, similar concept. Obviously, even Amazon, which was already a big company at the time, still had some initial resistance from many customers. I could remember that, hey, look, do we really want to host this data, and how do we trust this, and how scalable is this, how resilient is this? But of course, now we all know it's a multi-trillion dollar market, right? So the timing, what I learned the hard way is that ideas are great, timing has to be perfect, and then the market fit has to be there at the right time. So that was a great learning experience, which helped me as a stepping stone to go build my subsequent startups.
So you mentioned earlier that one of your uh, keys is you always are looking for the bigger purpose and the bigger challenge that you're trying to solve for the customer and so on, instead of just the technology, but rather the people and the bigger problem or the bigger challenge. What do you see at Max IQ right now that you guys are doing that you would say, this is the bigger purpose, this is the challenge we're solving, that's important, right? That's, like you mentioned, early stage cloud. And prior to that, it was this idea of the open source foundation and operating systems. And you were betting your career on some awesome bets that really were the right challenges to take on or the right timing. What do you see as Max IQ's timing and challenges that they're facing, or that
Yeah,
they're solving?
trying to solve. Yeah, absolutely. So just a little bit of a context, right? Today, almost all organizations, sales organizations, right? So even though there are existing tools out there in the market today for sales forecasting, discovery, winning deals, and accurately forecasting, or things of that nature, right? There are fragmented tools out there. Even the existing tools today, things like Salesforce and many of those tools out there, they're becoming more and more like databases to store information. What is still fully not solved yet is this whole what we call the end-to-end revenue platform. How do you optimize go-to-market teams to optimize for the revenue across, not only prospecting, winning deals, accurately forecasting it, but typically, sales teams or go-to-market teams' job is not done when the sales is done. That's actually, it just begins at that time. Right now, customer success, when the thing gets transitioned to customer success folks, how do you make sure the customer is successful in actually adopting the product that you have just sold them, as well as understanding where the challenges are, and then trying to help them to make sure you can renew, you can retain, and expand and things like that. So this whole thing together from the left to the right is what we've been calling the revenue journey platform. This is accurate forecasting, accurate deal inspection, conversation intelligence, and moving this on to transferring this context to customer success teams to help them to continue to be, for the customers to be successful as well as adapt and expand, right? This is what we're trying to solve, a single stop solution for go-to-market teams to optimize across their entire customer journey, is what we're solving right now. Includes obviously AI, goes without saying, leveraging AI across the board, whether you are forecasting, whether you are using conversation intelligence, and so on.
Yeah, Taylor and I talk about this one all the time, and we get into a lot of heated debates. I would say that there's been some verbal boxing matches specifically around how are we building our revenue engine, especially for us. We're a recruiting agency, right? So we have one group of people that are going out there doing the B2B sales, knocking on doors, and we've got the other, which is focused on delivery. But at the same time, our recruiters more or less are still salespeople. They're going out prospecting people, like essentially deals. And we're like, how do we have a single system to do that? We don't. It's so fragmented. We have 3 or 4 different, 5 different tools that we use today, and we've probably added on and taken off 6 or 7 other systems. And from my understanding, there's over 400 different ATSs in the world, and most of them are better for recruiting or better for sales. And maybe they're a CRM, maybe they're not. It's super obnoxious, super fragmented. And that doesn't even start with like pipeline stuff, follow-up stuff, email campaign stuff, and all the
Right.
other GTM stuff that could be included in that function, right? So I'm curious though, which is that when you're thinking about the revenue platform that you're building, like you have to have the right team to win, because there's probably 1,000, 100,000, I don't know, I'm going to exaggerate here, 100,000 other people trying to compete in the CRM or sales implementation space. How do you go about making sure that you're building the right people, hiring the right people, and investing in the right human capital that's going to allow your team to win? Because again, you've placed bets, you've founded multiple startups, you've been successful, like you've built winning teams. I want to kind of unpack that secret sauce.
Yeah, that's actually an extremely important question in my mind, Shane, which is really, as I mentioned early on, right? Companies are about people, right? It's more than the technology, it's about people. And some of the key things that I look for to build, from my experience building winning teams, is I look for, 4 or 5 key attributes or, characteristics of people that I'm, looking for, and regardless of what level they're coming in. They're an individual contributor, managers, technologists, doesn't matter who you're looking for. The first and foremost thing that I typically look for is open-mindedness, right? So more often than not, especially the experienced people you come across, to say, well, I've done this way in the past, it's been successful, and therefore that must be the only way or only the right way to do it this time, right? Maybe not. Right? One of the things I particularly look for and ask during the process is to say, how open-minded are they? Are they willing to explore, to say, look, yeah, maybe things have been done this way in the past, they've been successful, we worked well, but maybe things have changed, maybe it's going to work differently right now, so let's just figure it out. And then be able to learn, willingness to learn, as well as, more importantly, unlearn, right? All of us, we all been down this path, which is, yeah, I've done this over and over and again 3 times, and therefore it's really hard for me to imagine any other way to do this, right? It's extremely important for people to think that it's okay. Yes, I've done it 3 times, been very great. Now what? We're in a different time. Maybe the same things will work. Maybe it won't. So that's a very important thing that I look for in people. Open-mindedness, willingness to learn and unlearn. unlearn. And then the other thing is really questioning the status quo. So most successful teams always do that in a respectful way, right? I don't mean in any derogatory way, but what I mean by challenge the assumptions, right? If we are going after a certain assumptions, we're going after a certain, product direction or any other direction out there, challenge the status quo, ask the right questions, and don't be afraid to, get the right answers, right? Rather than just accepting, well, yes, this is the direction we've been set. Yeah, this is how we're going, and let's go do that, right? It's okay to ask those questions. I'm looking for people who are not afraid, but at the same time, just because you ask those questions doesn't necessarily mean you're not necessarily committing to what's there. Have a deliberate discussion, good debate, discuss, but commit, and then of course execute, right? That's the extremely important characteristic that I look for in people. And then the fourth is failing fast. I encourage people always to try new bold things, but if something isn't going to work, I would rather have it fail fast. Learn fast, figure out to see, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? If it's not going to work, fail fast, and then course correct, adapt, and then move on. That's more important to me than being afraid to not try new things or being afraid to not experiment. But try bold things, envision for bigger picture, but be grounded in facts, be grounded in reality on what's practical, what's possible, what's not possible. And finally, last but not the least, is the being a team player, right? You could be an individual star, and we've all seen this. I'm a sports junkie. I watch a lot of Major League Baseball, football, NFL, and so on, right? How many times we've all seen where a single individual star alone isn't necessarily going to win you the championship. You got to be a team player. You have to put the team interest and the company interest first, right? So how much of a team player are you? Can you collaborate? Can you work with them? So those are really the qualities that I look for, regardless of what level that I'm typically hiring to build a successful teams around them
Who,
for the companies.
who's your team? Who's the team that you root for the most?
In the sports, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I follow a lot of teams. Of course, I'm based out here in the Bay Area. I watch 49ers. I look at San Francisco Giants baseball, Warriors. But I also, because I follow players, players move from town to town. And then I pretty much follow a lot of teams. But of course, I do root for Niners and the Giants.
Well, your Giants just snagged University of Tennessee's baseball coach, which is like a
Yeah, I know.
historic. We're talking about hiring. That was a historic hire for the Giants to go get a college coach, which has almost never been done. They say really hasn't truly been done, and bring him into Major League Baseball. So I'm actually really interested to see how that works out. And that would go to, they're open-minded, they're questioning the status quo, kind of fits some of the narrative of what you said with key attributes. So for Max IQ, you guys are growing, you guys are hiring. How do you find some of those things on a resume, right? Like, let's say that you're working with an agency, right? Do you ever work with recruiting agencies to find your people?
Yeah, so we do sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you say you're really important is open-minded, question status quo, fail fast, team player, how would you teach either your internal team or recruiting agency? How do you find that on a resume, right? You don't.
You don't. Typically, you don't. Nobody puts that on the resume, right? So, by the way, just before I answer that, right? So, I think you're right. See, the Giants hiring a Tennessee coach, that's a bold move. Has never been done,
Yep.
but they are experimenting it. And obviously, hopefully, they won't fail. But if they're going to fail, they would fail fast, right? So that's what you would
Yep.
look for. But coming back to your question, no, you don't find them on resumes. Obviously, this is why it is so difficult. It's not an easy thing. Typically, you scan your resumes for their skill set and everything else, but ultimately when you actually end up speaking to the candidate, that is where the only time you're actually going to find out, based on the kinds of questions you ask them or understanding their approach to solving a problem. That's how would you know how open they are, or are they preset in their mind that this is exactly how they're going to do it. That's how you would know, but you can't really find that on a resume.
Yeah, and I'm curious, as teams are evolving in 2025 and we're going into 2026, everybody's talking about AI. Everybody's talking about paired programming with new tools, kits, new like Cursor, Anthropic, Open, whatever the tool of the day is for every single team, right? how do you believe that AI is going to change the way that the average company starts to hire in 2026? That's a big conversation. That's been a big topic. We have a lot of customers today that are asking us, for a variety of different things. But I'm curious of like, how do you think AI is going to change the way that the average manager hires people for their team?
Yeah, this is actually a pretty hot topic of the day, as you can imagine, right? So, depending on who you talk to, people throw in their different viewpoints, and some as extreme as people even talking about, hey, AI actually, eliminating some of these positions or jobs and all of that. My viewpoint is really this, right? And I'll give you some examples on why I think this way. That certainly AI is changing the world, changing how people think about how they go about doing their jobs. AI is here obviously to help automate a lot of things which otherwise people would have taken a long time to manually figure out through other technologies or by other means, right? Now, it is true that if previously if you're hiring a number of jobs, you had to write some code. Yeah, sure, AI by virtue of the automating it, like you mentioned, Cursor, you mentioned a number of those tools, right? We all use those tools. Sure, the because of those efficiencies gained, you may not need as many number of those engineers as you would have required in the past. That is true. But this is not to say that this is in net, it's going to reduce the number of jobs. It's actually moving those positions or jobs into a different sector. How do you then leverage that to further build additional capabilities, right? So transforming. Now, the example I'll say is that some people would say, SAS is dead or some other technology is dead. Not really. What's actually happening is that the outcomes are never going to be dead. Yeah, how you present an application, a service, software as a service application to people, that's not going to necessarily change. Previously, you might be building a bunch of APIs and services and doing some lookups in the database and doing this in X or Y or Z. Some of those operations are going to be now automated through AI agents, but nonetheless, you would still have to have an application, provide that as a service, right? Now, you may have to retool or look for people to do other things. How do I then do automation? How do I then expand my capabilities to integrate into many other tools so that everything is now becomes a single stop, right? I truly believe that while temporarily you may see that it appears as though the number of jobs are getting reduced, or I wouldn't use the word eliminated, but getting reduced, but they're actually going to shift from the type of roles into a different type of roles. Very simple example, right? Even back in late 80s or 80s and 70s when computerization, digitization came in, we all remember banks, insurance companies, they all used to have manual ledgers. People used to actually write all of that, right? As soon as the computerization came in, everybody was worried about that time. So it's going to eliminate everything. The industries are going to die. They didn't die, but all of them were actually retooled. All the people that needed to do whatever they needed to do, they learned new things, and then things moved on, right? In the process, efficiencies have been gained. It's for the better, but people started doing other things that will help complement that. And
So, so
I
if
think,
you were to start over today, like
yeah.
start your career journey over today, when you had started, you got involved with a company that was part of the consortium that was the open source foundation, and like you were making that bet that was the direction kind of technology was going. If you were to redo it today and you were to start over, what would be some bets as to where you would start your career and places you would start your career? Obviously, Max IQ, but why? What about the company would you be looking for that says this is a place that really gets where the future is going?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a silver bullet, but I'll tell you. So the thing is, a lot of the things that I've learned all of these years out there, right? If I were to redo that, um, one is I would look for where is the value created. In fact, one of the things that one of the investors told me in one of the startups I was raising funds for, which I would never forget, he said, "Hey, Sastry, whatever you're trying to build, if you give it for free, if you're not even attracting any people massively, then that means that there is not enough value created there." So whether it's open source, whether it's commercial, whether it's AI, whether it's a database, whether it's Max IQ, whether it's something else, right? Technologies and products and where you are changes from time to time. But the thing that I would look for is that what's the value ecosystem, conviction, and um, partnership with customers to create value. what is the value? How are we going to create the value? That's what I would do that. That's where I would go, work for a company if I were to redo all of that.
Yeah, we actually talk about that when it comes to when we're looking for an engineer to bring over to a company like a Max IQ. Is we don't ask what what do you do at your job currently. We ask what is the business value that you bring to your job, right? What is the business value and how do you make an impact on your team? Not just what language do you code, Python or TypeScript or whatever. It's more what's the value of the feature that you have built for the application that actually is impactful. What's the business value?
Well, the irony is there's so many people that just literally cannot answer that question, right? To your point, I think earlier on in your career, Sastry, you were like, I became curious. I was curious not only what I was building, what tools I was using, but what was the purpose behind those tools? What was the purpose behind the feature that I was developing overall? And I think that a unanimous thing that I've heard across all of our customers, especially when AI is getting implemented into day-to-day jobs, is that coding is a baseline table stake expectation at this point. And understanding architecture, understanding solution engineering, understand customer empathy, and understanding what the customer pain point is, and almost the psychology behind what you're building is what's really pushing the needle now. Where because of these coding assistants and whatnot, like the coding's fundamental. It's basic. It's table stakes. It's understanding the architecture, the design, the systems, and being more forward and customer facing than we've ever been before. And that's what I see as a massive shift that's starting to happen in 2026.
For sure, Shane, for sure. That's exactly what we're saying. You're absolutely correct. Coding, whether it's manual coding or using AI tools to generate it, that's all table stakes. Everybody's got to do that. But what's really the purpose behind it, the value behind it? What's the business value? Who is actually going to benefit from what you're trying to do? That, when people understand, I've seen this firsthand so many times, when engineers understand that, their productivity jumps up like there's no tomorrow. But if you just ask them, hey, let's go code this, let's go build this, sure, I'm going to go build that, but I don't understand why we're building what we're building, then we're likely not going to get as much productivity.
Yeah. So the last thing, and this again has its 2025 controversy around it, is as you're looking at building and growing your team, are you doing it onshore? Are you doing it on site? Are you doing it near shore? Are you are you building it internationally? Different time zones. What do you look at when it comes to building your team and how Max IQ is looking at building for growth?
Yeah, that's another good question. That really depends on the stage of the company, typically, right? So especially when you're in early stage, you're trying to optimize. Your parameters are going to be different. You're trying to optimize for cost. When you are in, growing and you've gone to the bigger size, then your parameters are, expanding the talent. But there's always going to be an element of offshoring for obviously getting the talent as well as for optimizing the cost. And then, but once you have products, you release products, and then you're actually expanding in your customer base, and then you need 24/7 coverage. You need to acquire the right talent across all the different time zones. So what I see is that typically when you're a small real estate startup, you start off offshore or start off with some part-time folks. Once you have a version of a product, and once you start recruiting customers, acquiring customers, then you expand across the board. That's how I see. It's primarily, ultimately, balancing talent and cost, and where is the trade-off? That's how I see it.
Cool. So last thing is, where do you see Max IQ as we start moving into 2026? And actually, this might even get released in 2026. Where do you see Max IQ going? Because again, sitting in your seat, you're a visionary, you're a CTO. Where do you see the next iterations of Max IQ and where it's headed?
Yeah, so I think in 2026, a year from now, right? So it's already underway. So we heavily see this entire pieces of revenue journey platform pieces, and we actually call them Echo IQ, Inspect IQ for deal inspection, forecast prediction, using AI to be able to do insights and actually predict the risks and help the teams. And then using conversation intelligence, like the conversations that we're having right now. How do you glean when sales representatives are actually having conversations with their prospects or existing customers or otherwise? How do you glean insights or any action items that come out of it? How do you then help coach the reps and teams to the benefit of both the customers so they get the value as well as to the sales reps? and then transfer that context into what we call success IQ, which is really post sale. How do you then transfer the knowledge, implement action plans, as well as identify what leads to expansion and renewal. So we see a great path for the upcoming 12 months to see how we're going to unify all of these four different modules that we're talking about. Heavily, obviously, building AI native product, and then helping customers to optimize their revenues across the board. We see that is coming up in the next 12 months. Highly encouraging.
All right. So last question. Are you excited about the college football playoff?
No? Yeah, I'm not, to be honest with you, not as much into college football, but definitely I'm excited. But I'm more into the professional sports. Yeah,
we're in Tennessee, so college sports is kind of a cult out here.
It is.
I'm not used to it. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and I was never a part of the college football, basketball, but it's a cult out here.
Yeah, sure. Chicago. That's where I'm from. And same thing. It was. You're a Bears fan, you're a Sox fan because the Cubs suck. I'm just saying. We all agree on that.
Yeah.
And then we moved, when I moved here, college sports is the dominant force here more than anything else. All right, fine. Who's going to win, Bears or Packers this weekend?
I'm actually, are you asking who's going to win, or are you asking who am I rooting for?
Who are you rooting for?
Well, actually, you know what? The Bears and the Niners are going to be in the thing together for contesting the #1 seed. So I would rather have the Packers win.
Oh, stop it. Gosh, this was such a good interview until right there. It just went off the rails at the end.
No, and I think, at this point, it's anybody's game. And I think they both are really good teams. Jordan Love and then Caleb Williams, both are good players. They can,
I know. For the first time in a long time, both teams are competitive.
Yeah, they're absolutely.
So, and I'm a big Brock Purdy fan. So I like Brock Purdy. I like George Kittle. I like Christian McCaffrey. So I like the Niners too. So, well, Sastry, how can the viewers, how can they get a hold of you? Because I'm guessing there's people who are like, holy cow, this is definitely the kind of person that can be a mentor, that I want to be on his team, I want to look up to, and so on. How can they get a hold of you or Max IQ?
Yeah, I think a couple of ways. First, to get a hold of me personally, I think the LinkedIn is probably the best way. They can message me. And then, of course, get Max IQ. I think there is info at Max IQ. There is careers at maxiq.com. If people are looking for jobs, they can certainly reach out that. And those emails are actually there on our website as well. So they don't have to look for it. They can click on those. But to reach out to me, just LinkedIn is the best way.
Excellent. All right. So everyone reach out to Sastry on LinkedIn. Go check out Max IQ at maxiq.com. That's correct?
Right? Get maxiq.com. Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you so much for joining us. I thought this was awesome. We'll check back in with you maybe in a year or so, and we'll talk about, and we get to look back and go, hey, 2026, what was that journey like? What did you guys accomplish, and what's on the roadmap for 2027? So
awesome. Thanks for the great conversation. Yeah.
And for everybody else, do the liking, the commenting, and all the stuff that
you're supposed to all the stuff you do on YouTube and social media and everything else. So again, Sastry, thanks so much for joining. For everyone else, we'll see you soon. Bye.